Hello, everyone. Welcome to lecture number 6 of this presidential debate series. We have seen so many different things happen so far, but now we're at the point where we're really getting into the dangerous stuff. There are two very, very important things that I want to start this lecture off with. One is that we're moving from debates that are televised to televised debates, which I know sounds like the same thing, but it's really not. And secondly, we're moving to the formation of the Commission on Presidential Debates, something that's going to necessitate its own lecture, which will probably be the next one, which is the formation of the Commission on Presidential Debates. We're still in the 80s here. We're about to have the 1980 debates and the 1984 debates. These debates are incredibly significant. They transform the notion of presidential debates, but only because of this one guy and his one weird trick.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Ronald Reagan. Communication and debate scholars hate him because of his one weird trick. That is, he was an incredibly successful and famous actor before going into politics. For many reasons, is the all-time presidential debate champion. I don't think there'll be someone as good as him ever again, and I also think that he's underrated in terms of his performance in presidential debates. He knew exactly what he's doing because he understood that these were televised debates, not debates that are being shown on television. He understood that the audience and the target of what he's saying is the camera. But this isn't new for Ronald Reagan. His political start was in front of speaking for the camera, and he was masterful at it. One of the greatest speeches in American history, also underrated, is a speech that Ronald Reagan called The Speech. It was a speech he gave in 1964 in support of Barry Goldwater, who was the Republican senator from Arizona running for president against Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Now let's set the record straight. There's no argument over the choice between peace and war, but there's only one guaranteed way you can have peace, and you can have it in the next second: surrender. Admittedly, there's a risk in any course we follow other than this, but every lesson of history tells us that the greater risk lies in appeasement. And this is the specter our well-meaning liberal friends refuse to face, that their policy of accommodation is appeasement. And it gives no choice between peace and war, only between fight or surrender. If we continue to accommodate, continue to back and retreat, eventually we have to face the final demand, the ultimatum. And what then?
Ronald Reagan just called it The Speech, but today we call this speech A Time for Choosing, and it remains a masterpiece and a masterclass in how to speak for a camera while in front of the audience. Now, let's take the naive situation of the presidential debates. We have the League of Women Voters running things as an event that they're hosting, but only sort of as a ruse so that TV stations can cover the debates, which are exceedingly popular, and people really like them. And now we're sort of treating it like a bad fan of race car driving. We're kind of looking for the wrecks after Gerald Ford and the invention of the gaff. The 1980 debates are an incredible, unique moment in presidential debating because now we start to see some disagreement, not between networks and parties, and not between the network and the League of Women Voters. We're not seeing conflict there. What we're seeing conflict is in between the parties and the League of Women Voters because of what happened in 1980 in the presidential race. Ronald Reagan had the Republican nomination, but there was another player in the game, Congressman John Anderson, who I think today would be a libertarian, but he also thought he deserved the Republican nomination, and he ran for president as an independent. So now we have a three-way race, and the League of Women Voters had to decide what to do about an independent candidate. They decided just to invite all three to the event, and the Carter campaign said no way. Carter was down in the polls, he was unpopular, and didn't want to be the target of two different Republicans critiquing him because, as we know, even though Anderson is an independent, he's a Republican. He's been a Republican in Congress for a long time. He's running for president as an independent, but he's still going to be opposed to the Carter administration. So Jimmy Carter declined to attend that debate. It went forward anyway. It's often called the empty podium debate, and it really had an effect on the way we perceive these debates, their necessity, and it had a huge impact on the political parties, the two major political parties who didn't want this to happen again just because of the way it looked. Take a look at the opening.
My colleagues and I agreed to participate tonight, although the questioners are limited by the constraints of the format, because we thought with the League of Women Voters that it is desirable to seek a comparison of views on a few issues in a joint appearance by the men who would be the next President of the United States. Former Governor Ronald Reagan, the Republican Party candidate, and Congressman John Anderson, who is running as an independent, accepted the League of Women Voters' invitation to be here. President Carter declined. Mr. Reagan and Mr. Anderson will respond with their views on certain issues posed by questions from my colleagues.
Now, I wonder if it would have been in Carter's interest to attend, because I don't know if it's better or worse, because every speech that Reagan and Anderson give in this debate ends with, well, you know, Reagan is really good at this. He says things like, well, Mr. Anderson, and I can go on and on and on, but the man who really should be here declined to come.
Before beginning my closing remarks here, I would just like to remark a concern that I have that we have criticized the failures of the Carter policy here rather considerably, both of us this evening, and there might be some feeling of unfairness about this because he was not here to respond. But I believe it would have been much more unfair to have had John Anderson denied the right to participate in this debate. And I want to express my appreciation to the League of Women Voters for adopting a course with which I believe the great majority of Americans are in agreement.
Mr. Moyer, President Carter was not right a few weeks ago when he said that the American people were confronted with only two choices, with only two men, and with only two parties. I think you've seen tonight in this debate that Governor Reagan and I have agreed on exactly one thing. We are both against the reimposition of a peacetime draft. We have disagreed, I believe, on virtually every other issue. I respect him for showing tonight, for appearing here. And I thank the League of Women Voters for the opportunity that they have given me. I am running for president as an independent because I believe our country is in trouble.
And Anderson would be like, yeah, I agree. We're both opposed. We're in more agreement than disagreement. So it really allowed them to shore up the base, and it also allowed, I mean, maybe it was good that Carter wasn't there because Anderson ended up supporting a lot of Reagan's ideas. That 1980 debate becomes the starting point where the two major parties, Democrat and Republican, say, uh-oh, maybe we better get a handle on these events so that we don't get uninvited guests. Maybe we should try to figure out a way to be more in control, because the League of Women Voters, from the start, has been very independent. Remember, in the Carter-Ford debates, pool cameras, which led to audio outage. Every network wanted to bring their own cameras, and like I said in that lecture, that's weird. If this is a news event worth covering, and we're getting a Section 315 exemption for airing it, why pool cameras? That seems more like a media event rather than an event the media is covering, right? Conspiracy. Conspiracy to thwart federal election law. There were other debates that Anderson did not come to, debates that the League sponsored in order to get Carter to come. Carter and Reagan debated a couple of times. And this is where Ronald Reagan shows that he is the all-time champion, A++, at presidential debates, because he understood that the function of the presidential debate is to argue to the camera, to the people, but do it in bite-sized chunks that today we would say go viral. Ronald Reagan has the most viral moments from his debates than any other presidential debater ever. Here's the first one.
In the past, the relationship between Social Security and Medicare has been very important to provide some modicum of aid for senior citizens in the retention of health benefits. Governor Reagan, as a matter of fact, began his political career campaigning around this nation against Medicare. Now we have an opportunity to move toward national health insurance with an emphasis on the prevention of disease, an emphasis on outpatient care, not inpatient care, an emphasis on hospital cost containment to hold down the cost of hospital care for those who are ill, an emphasis on catastrophic health insurance, so that if a family is threatened with being wiped out economically because of a very high medical bill, then the insurance would help pay for it. These are the kind of elements of a national health insurance important to the American people. Governor Reagan, again, typically is against such a proposal.
Governor,
There you go again. When I opposed Medicare, there was another piece of legislation meeting the same problem before the Congress. I happened to favor the other piece of legislation and thought that it would be better for the senior citizens and provide better care than the one that was finally passed. I was not opposing the principle of providing care for them. I was opposing one piece of legislation as versus another.
Now, you just watched that clip. What was Carter arguing for? What was Carter's argument? I bet you've forgotten, right? Because this is like what we would call like a wine cracker in terms of rhetoric. So the wine cracker in rhetoric is something that you would give to the audience in order to cleanse the palate so they can taste your brand and not get any interference from the previous one. But this is like an atomic wine cracker, like future wine cracker that just wipes your memory. It's so powerful. Like, what do you mean, there you go again? Like, what is that referring to? There you go again. And it's just so good because it's like, oh, he's up to his old tricks. Nobody's been able to do that again. In fact, you see presidential debaters since Reagan say the there you go again line as the rhetorical winecracker moment. It is just less successful than the way Reagan did it. And look at how he mastered that cut shot. Smiling and laughing. He understands the camera is his audience, not the people listening to the claims or data. Jimmy Carter misreads it completely. Somebody who performed so great against Gerald Ford in the 1976 debates has completely missed that this is all about your mediated appearance, something that Jack Kennedy understood well, but not as well as Ronald Reagan does. The other incredible viral moment from the Reagan-Carter debates in 1980 is this closing statement.
Next Tuesday is Election Day. Next Tuesday, all of you will go to the polls. You'll stand there in the polling place and make a decision. I think when you make that decision, it might be well if you would ask yourself, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Is it easier for you to go and buy things in the stores than it was 4 years ago? Is there more or less unemployment in the country than there was 4 years ago? Is America as respected throughout the world as it was? Do you feel that our security is as safe, that we're as strong as we were 4 years ago? And if you answer all of those questions yes, why then I think your choice is very obvious as to who you'll vote for. If you don't agree, if you don't think that this course that we've been on for the last 4 years is what you would like to see us follow for the next 4, then I could suggest another choice that you have.
It's too good. It's too good. This is the heart. This is an example that I think a lot of Roman rhetoric teachers would love of the peroration, the ending to a speech that sort of says, well, it could be this or this, but I'm going to bring us all together in this elation, this lifting up of emotion and claim, this real drive of feeling of like us all coming together. And it has a kind of a force of motion to it that makes you want to act the way the speaker wants you to. It's just profoundly beautiful from a speech perspective. And also, you see other people doing the same thing. In future debates, people will cite this. They will use Reagan's line. If that's not going viral in a presidential debate, I don't really know what is. That's the model. Ronald Reagan's acting experience, his power with the camera made him an unforgettable president. He gave so many speeches as president that are now in our lexicon. The Challenger speech, KAL-003, also known as the Korean Airline Massacre speech, his farewell address, all of the things he did to a camera in the Oval Office are just chef's kiss of rhetoric. They're just profoundly good. That got him into the White House, his ability to speak. But once he was there, people started questioning his age. People started questioning if he had the capability of being president. 1984 comes, and he's facing Democratic nominee for president Walter Mondale. Mondale was also a very experienced politician, but didn't really hold his own in the debates against Ronald Reagan. In the first debate, Mondale squeaked it out. Reagan was a little distracted, didn't really seem like himself. He seemed kind of tired, something that we'll see in the Romney-Obama debate. In the first one of that, we'll see later on, is that people thought Obama was off his game and maybe a little tired, and Romney kind of surprised everybody. This is one of the first moments in the Mondale-Reagan debate, the first one, where we see that lowered expectations actually help a debater. If the media and people don't think you're going to do very well against a very seasoned politician, then your stock can only go up. You don't have to do that much, and people think that you've really done a good job in the debate. In the second debate, this becomes a topic. It's circulating in the media, and Ronald Reagan turns it into his most powerful debate moment ever. And also, I would submit to you, the most powerful moment in the history of presidential debating.
Mr. President, I want to raise an issue that I think has been lurking out there for 2 or 3 weeks and cast it specifically in national security terms. You already are the oldest president in history, and some of your staff say you were tired after your most recent encounter with Mr. Mondale. I recall yet that President Kennedy had to go for days on end with very little sleep during the Cuba Missile Crisis. Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances?
Not at all, Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience. If I still have time, I might add, Mr. Truitt, I might add that it was Seneca or it was Cicero, I don't know which, that said, if it was not for the elders correcting the mistakes of the young, there would be no state.
After that, later on, being asked about his experience running for president, Walter Mondale said at that moment he realized that he was going to lose the election. That's how powerful that moment was for him, that they had severely underestimated Ronald Reagan, and that they were going to lose big time in 1984, and they did. Now that moment can't go viral because it's so highly contextual. It's beautiful rhetorically, but some of the things that are interesting about rhetoric is its value is usually highly contextual and not repeatable. That's one of the things that's interesting about rhetoric is you can tell people how to do it extremely well in a particular context, but then that context has no transferability. That excellence can't really be transferred very easily from one context to another, which that's hard for people. They want to have kind of a silver bullet argumentation theory or silver bullet debate strategy, something that would literally work in every debate. But that's just not how rhetoric works. It's audience, time, context, and topic. And Ronald Reagan knew exactly how to crank that one out of the park. I guess it is a lot like baseball pitching. It's about the night, how you feel, whether you can read the pitcher, what the temperature is like. All these factors lead to someone being able to really crush a baseball or crush a moment in a presidential debate, just the way that Ronald Reagan did it. Ronald Reagan, Ronnie explains it all. Master of the presidential debate form, but it's about to change. It's about to change in a big way. In fact, 1984 would be the last year that the League of Women Voters would host a debate. In 1988, the newly formed Commission on Presidential Debates would take over hosting responsibilities as a nonpartisan entity that sponsors these political debates for the media to cover. The public and the media didn't demand for a change. It was the parties that demanded for a change, and they created the very thin veneer of a nonpartisan organization. But because Mondale's group and Reagan's group couldn't agree on journalists, there were going to be no journalist panelists for a long time. They couldn't find any agreement. And that frustrated the league, frustrated the parties, and led to a big sea change. So in 1988, we'll see some differences with the formation of the Commission on the Presidential Debates in the next lecture.